Welcome to the Chess Angle. This is not your typical chess podcast. If you're an amateur or club-level player, the Chess Angle is for you. Our content is aimed at busy adults who are serious about the game but have limited study time. Featured guests include both amateur and titled players alike. And now, here's your host, Director of the Long Island Chess Club, Neil Bellon.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Couple of interesting things at the club. So first off, the church where we meet, they got brand new tables for the main hall where we meet. Now, it's a public room. We're not the only group that uses it. But I had spoken to the church board, really great people. And I said, the tables you have there now, they've been there for decades. They're kind of heavy. They're cumbersome. They're kind of starting to fall apart. So they ordered new ones, really nice 8-foot tables, and they're easy to fold and put away because at the end of the night, we have to sort of reset the room a bit. No big deal. Everybody helps out. But here's the funny thing, and it goes to the whole chess players are weird. So we get these new tables, and they're set up. A couple of guys helped me who got there early. But the thing is, we had about maybe 35 people there. Nobody said anything, not one comment, wow, these are really nice tables, thanks for the new tables. Nobody said anything, not like I'm the type who's looking for validation or compliments, but I just find it funny that it's so blatant. It's so obvious that we have these new tables and nobody said anything. Everybody just wanted to play their game. Not one comment. Seriously, nobody said, gee, Neil, this is really nice. You got new tables. But it's like I said, that's why they say chess players are weird. So that was one thing. Then another thing, little bit of a ruling. You may be wondering if you're permitted to look at your opponent's score sheet or if you can borrow it if you need it. Let's say you messed up a score. And here's the thing. First of all, you are allowed to look at your opponent's score sheet if it's visible. So in other words, let's say it's their turn to move. You're allowed to sort of stare at their score sheet. That's fine if you want. But the other thing is, it's also customary if you messed up your score sheet and you just think you maybe missed a move, you can ask your opponent to borrow his score sheet, and it's generally customary for you to allow that. But here's the thing. If you want to borrow your opponent's score sheet, it has to be on your time. Your clock has to be running. And we had a situation where he kept asking for his opponent's score sheet when his clock was running. So I had to say, look, that's fine, but you have to wait till your clock's running. All right. So if you want to borrow your opponent's score sheet, that's fine, but you have to be on the move. So just a little kind of rulebook thing there. Next thing has to do with digital clocks. Couple of things there. First of all, they are not to be set with any sound. That's actually in the rulebook. They're supposed to be set with no sound because those beeps, beep, beep, every time somebody moves. That's ridiculous. Nobody wants to hear that. So turn the sound off. Most digital clocks, if not all of them, have that option. And then interestingly, on one board, 2 players were using an analog clock. I mean, really, what? Come on, guys. What is this, 1985? Seriously, digital clocks with time delay are the standard. Now, I try to do a once-over before my game starts. I guess I got caught up with other things with people coming up to me, and I didn't notice this till the rounds had already started. And no big deal. But the thing is, since they started the game with that clock, they have to finish with that clock. That's also a rule. The other thing with a digital clock, because a lot of people don't know this, it has to be set so that the time control ends at 6 o'clock. So ours is a game 90, so you would set it to 4:30 so that it ends at 6. The reason is, I believe, is because at 6 o'clock, the hands are the furthest away from each other, the minute and hour hands, so there's no confusion. But that is the rule. It should be set so that it ends at 6 o'clock. The real rule is don't use an analog clock. It's 2025. Digital clocks with time delay are the standard, and they're pretty inexpensive now. And last thing I'll say about the club, very interesting. We had a 1900 rated player, almost 2000. He might be, but he's at least mid-1900s. He hung a knight. He simply moved it where it could be taken. And it's interesting. A couple of takeaways here. First of all, even players at that level do hang pieces from time to time. It's generally rare, but it does happen. I mean, even grandmasters will hang a piece occasionally, but you'd be surprised, 1800, 1900, 2000, it happens. And the reason for the oversight, it was a very strong move that, I mean, other than the fact that it could be taken, right? But assuming it couldn't be taken, it was a strong move because it forked two of the opponent's pieces. It just looked like a real juicy square for the knight. But he missed something that's very common, which is that cross-court, what I call that cross-court movement of his opponent's rook. So in other words, he moves the knight and the rook slid across the rank to take it, and play along a rank where a queen or a rook slides horizontally across a rank, not down a file. That is actually one of the most missed moves in chess. So the three most missed moves are the one I just described, play along a rank rather than a file, and the other two are backward diagonal moves or retreating diagonal moves, and the other big one is retreating knight moves. So play along a rank, retreating diagonal moves, and retreating knight moves are the three most missed ideas at all levels. But it was very interesting because he still won the game because he's just very, very strong, very resourceful. So he moves his knight there, misses that his opponent can simply slide his rook to take it, but he just played amazingly well from that point on. And even though he was down material, he ended up getting two very dangerous connected passed pawns, and he eventually won. I mean, it was quite remarkable, the turnaround. His opponent was a bit lower rated, so that probably helped. I mean, if you were playing a fellow 1900, 2000, might not have been so easy. But very fascinating to watch, an excellent exercise in not giving up and being resilient. But it just goes to show you players of all levels will make elementary blunders. So that's it as far as club business. Now, let's jump into the listener mailbag. A reminder, the mailbag is open. Please send in your questions, comments, thoughts, and episode suggestions. You can email me directly, info@thechessangle.com, or you can use the contact form on our website. Since the last episode, I did receive a number of messages. That was the first episode in a while. I think it was 2 episodes ago because I had the interview episode. Anyway, received a lot of messages. Definitely keep them coming. If I replied that I will respond on the show, it may not be this week because I do spread them out like 3 or 4 per episode unless I'm doing a mailbag exclusive, but I just did that. So if I said that I'm going to read it on the show and it's not this week, don't worry, it's coming. But there's always room for more, so keep those messages coming. As always, I can't guarantee that I will reply or use it on the show, but I will take a look at everything. So again, please chime in. Our first message is from Tim. He says, "Dear Neil, just like you, I have been playing openings that I can just set and forget. For me, this was the London and the Caro-Kann. Lately, though, I have been getting extremely bored with every E4 player using the exchange variation against me, especially online since I have played almost 20,000 games in the last 3 years. The exchange variation is fine, but as black, it feels like all you play for is the minority attack, which at best wins you a pawn. Not much of an advantage, especially in an online blitz game. In classical over-the-board games, however, a pawn is more substantial, and I still love playing the Caro in those games. I would almost always like to play something else online, but wonder if this would make my opening knowledge and thus my rating fall back. Do you have any advice? Greetings, Tim from the Netherlands." Well, thanks, Tim. I don't know, maybe you're done with the Caro-Kann. We should call it the Caro-Can't. No, never mind. That was really bad dad humor. I kind of understand what you're going through. I'll kind of compare it to like something similar for me, and then I'll address the Caro-Kann a little bit. I'm not really a Caro-Kann person, but it's kind of the same thing in the French defense where white plays the exchange variation and it's very drawish. But I would say a couple of things, and this is my own bias. You can look at that as a good thing because, you know, as black, you're pretty much equalizing immediately. Like it's the same thing in the French defense, the advanced variation, exchange variation, it's instant equality for black. It really doesn't give white much. That's why most strong players and pretty much nobody at the title player level plays the exchange variation for the French defense is white because it really doesn't give them much. But as black, you should be happy for that. Like when I play the French and my opponent plays the exchange variation, I'll give them a high five because it just makes my life easier. Yeah, it's a little bit drawish, but it's easy to know what to do. It might get symmetrical for a while, but black's not going to have any problems. And it's the same thing with your exchange variation in the Caro-Kann. I understand a lot of people are playing it, but you should be thankful that as black, it's basically instant equality. Like you said, you win the pawn. But if you're looking to mix it up, there's probably plenty of things online about the exchange variation, different lines you can use that kind of mix it up a little bit. I'm sorry, I can't give you too much information because, like I said, I don't play it, but I would try to flip the narrative to make that a good thing because you're coming out of the opening at least equal or better. And if you're seeing it that much and you really don't like it, yeah, you may need to come up with something else. Now, you said if you come up with something else, would it make your opening knowledge fall back? Probably. Temporarily, yes, it would. It's the kind of thing when you change your openings, it kind of gets worse before it gets better because you're kind of learning some different things. You're seeing ideas that you kind of have to get some experience with. So that's what usually happens. If you make a change in your opening repertoire, it will get worse, but then eventually it will turn around. But if it's online, I wouldn't sweat the rating too much. But I think the more important thing from your email, you said in your over the board games that you're doing very well with it. So stick with it. Like I made a mistake last night, actually. I had a horrible game. I guess I was due for that. My opponent's a great guy. We were talking after and, I told him, I said, I was due for like a bad loss. I tried something different with the French. He didn't play the exchange variation. He did like a main line with like knight d2, and then I take the pawn, he takes back with the knight. Instead of going into my Fort Knox or my Rubinstein, I decided to mix it up with the Alekhine variation where you go knight f6 right away, and I got into some trouble. That's because I mixed it up. But you know what? If I insist on playing this variation, if I really study it and work at it more, then it'll work out. But yeah, when you initially change things, that's what happens. That was silly that I played this because I really didn't prepare it. I wanted to try something because he's kind of he's that kind of player. I wanted to mix it up a little bit. Didn't work out. That's how it works. I probably should have stuck with what I knew or played this other variation being a little bit better prepared. I thought I could get through it, but that's what happens. But thanks so much, Tim, for your email. Next message is from Terry. He says, "Hi there. I'd like to get your thoughts on underrated chess players and sandbagging. Chessers that are playing like 1800s, but rated 1400 and below." Well, just to be clear on the term, sandbagging isn't really where you're playing like an 1800, but you're rated 1400. Sandbagging is technically where you deliberately play worse than your rating. You deliberately throw games so that you can play in a lower section and win a prize. So let's say, for example, you're rated 2100, but there's a major tournament coming up and there's a lot of money for the prizes and you want to win and get a prize, obviously. So because you're 2100, you would have to play in like an over 2000 division, right? But because you want to win this money and have easier opponents, you say, okay, I'm going to sandbag. I'm going to deliberately tank some games, get my rating to drop to like 1900, and then you enter the under 2000 tournament with someone who's really 2100 strength with the hope of winning it and winning money. That's what sandbagging is, where you deliberately throw rating points to play in a lower category. Chess players who are playing like 1800s but are rated 1400 and below, that's just sort of rating deflation. That's just, how the system is because the way it works, and we've spoken about this, for a number of reasons, many players, their strength hasn't caught up to, I'm saying that backwards. For many players, their rating hasn't caught up to their strength. And it just takes a while for that to calibrate. So I just want to be clear rather on the terms. Anyway, Terry continues, "I learned how to play when I was a kid, but didn't register with the USCF until my mid-30s, gaining most of my experience online. By the time I played in my first rated tournament, I had played chess for over 20 years. I joined a club and everyone assumed that I was a rookie because my rating was in the 900s. Then I came in first place in a tournament against players 1,200 to 1,600, and I've even beaten 1,700 to 1,900 rated players in casual games at the club. A common topic of discussion is frustrations with the rating system and encountering underrated players like myself. I've seen guys decline from joining tournaments after seeing that I'm playing in it because they want to protect their rating. I've also been jokingly accused of sandbagging whenever I happen to lose rating to an 1,100 to 1,400 player, and I have to explain how they were playing like a master. Well, thanks, Terry, for chiming in. Let me address a couple of things there. Your situation is very typical where the person either played online or played on their own. They're pretty strong, but they haven't played in a US chess rated tournament. So they enter with that provisional rating or that low rating, but it doesn't reflect all their experience. That's just how it is. And of course, nobody wants to play that kind of person who has a listed rating of like 1,000, but is playing like 1,400 or 1,500. But that's just how it is. I almost wish there was some way to correct for that after the fact. I don't know all the math, but I agree that is frustrating. Now, the fact that you have guys dropping out because they want to protect their rating, I've seen that before. I've heard it before and I've seen it before. You know, I sometimes call those people rating preservers. Like they achieve, let's say, a 2,000 rating and they don't play again just because they're deathly afraid like it's going to drop down and they're going to lose that 2 in front of their rating. And to a certain extent, this might surprise people I'm saying this, to a certain extent, I understand that because I know how hard it is to get to that point, at least nowadays. That's what happens when somebody has a listed rating of, let's say, 1,000, but they're playing at least 500 points higher. Nobody wants to play them because they're afraid of losing rating. It works the other way too. You have some players who are at their floor, meaning they can't drop down below that point. So let's say you have someone rated 1,700 as their floor, but they're really playing at like 1,400 strength. Everybody wants to play that 1,700 because it's like an easy win because the person's playing much weaker than their listed rating, but because it's their floor, you get credit for the listed rating. So that's just how the system is. There are issues with the rating system. That's really a separate discussion and a separate rabbit hole. But I agree with you. And because of how it works, it does take a long time for the player's rating to catch up to their strength. So thanks for sharing your thoughts, Terry. I appreciate it. Next message, he says, Shemay from Wales. I guess that's hello. My name is Toby, and I am 12 years old. I have a FIDE classical rating of 1517, with probably my proudest achievement along the way being sharing first in the Welsh Under 12 Championship. Well, congratulations, Toby. That's awesome. He says, I love the podcast. Thank you for all your hard work that you do, balancing your incredible podcast with running your own chess club and more. Once again, thank you so much. My query for you is the following. How do you properly read a chess book? I find them very interesting and all, but save for a few tidbits, I cannot translate the information from the book to the board. What do I need to do to change that? Thanks. Well, first of all, Toby, really appreciate it. I love hearing from people your age. You're 12. I mean, we have kids as young as 6 or 7 listening to the podcast, so that's awesome. And what I would say about reading a chess book, it's going to vary depending who you ask, but here's my take. If the book is more about the thought process and chess psychology and mindset and things like that, you could probably just read the written prose and just look at a few of the positions. You don't necessarily have to look at every single position. So for example, take a book like The 7 Deadly Chess Sins. One of the sins he talks about is perfectionism, always looking for the best move. And he talks about how you can just play adequate moves. So if you open to the chapter on perfectionism, just read the written prose, which is really well done. Maybe look at 1 or 2 positions. You don't have to necessarily look at every single game in that chapter to get the gist of it. Now, other books that I feel are the true gems in the literature, something like The Amateur's Mind or Reassess Your Chess, things like that. Those books, I tell people, read cover to cover. Like something like The Amateur's Mind, that's just a book that no matter how long it takes you, you have to read it cover to cover. Now, what I do when I read a chess book, okay, there's kind of 2 things you can do. You could get the Chessable version of it, which has everything right there, the original text and all the positions, so you don't have to set anything up. You can look at variations it really is a really very, very efficient way to read a chess book. Or if you have the actual physical book in front of you, what I do, and I'm not saying this is the best way, but this is what I do that helps my learning and saves time, is you can have the book in front of you and then have an analysis board on your computer. Like Lichess studies are good for that, or chess.com analysis board, whatever you prefer. And this way you have everything right there. There are some people who also create PGN files for books. They're out there on the internet. You could find those. But that's generally how I read a book, where I have, if it's a physical book, it's in front of me. And then I have the computer. And I don't have a physical board. I put it on my computer. That's how I do it. Translates for me. You may want to try that. It's really what's best for you. But I hope that helps. And thanks so much, Toby, for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. Our final message is from Bob, and Bob did buy us a coffee on our Buy Me a Coffee page. That is our support platform. There's a link in the show notes if you're interested, so we appreciate that. And he writes, can you please do a podcast on the Kali and Kali Zukertort? It is a cousin of the London and should be in your wheelhouse. Is there a reason why you don't address the Kali? Thanks, Bob, for your message. I've mentioned it tangentially in other episodes, but yeah, you're right. I haven't done a dedicated episode on it, so I'm going to add that to the list. I think that's a good suggestion. I don't know when it would come out, but I'm going to put that in my notebook, and at some point, I will do a dedicated episode on the Kali. That is a good suggestion. It kind of fits in with a lot of the system openings that we use here. So thank you so much, Bob, for the suggestion and the coffee. We appreciate it. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in just a moment. And now back to the show. All right, so for our main content, we're going to talk about the idea that chess is much harder now than it has ever been. This is based on a Reddit post. I'll link it up in the show notes if you want to see it. I do check out Chess Reddit occasionally. I mean, as with most subreddits, there's a lot of complaining, a lot of negativity. But every now and then, there is a decent discussion on there with some good comments. So the actual post is titled just that, Chess is much harder now than it has ever been. And I'm going to give you the original poster's comments, and then we'll talk about some other comments that people posted on there. And he starts out by quoting, I am Andrus Toth. We all know I am Andrus Toth. He's a YouTuber, chess coach, very well-known chess educator, works with many adult improvers. And he puts that quote in its entirety. It's a little bit long, but it's interesting. And then I'll tell you what the original poster responded to. So here is I am Andrus Toth. He says, I was thinking about chess today and the current state of chess today versus what it was when I was still actively playing 20 years ago. And one thing that really stands out to me, and I think that a lot of people overlook this, is that chess has become, in general, far more difficult to master than what it used to be, for the sole reason that there are more people playing it, like exponentially more than 20 years ago. And so every rating chunk is represented in far greater numbers. And as a result of that, each rating chunk has got their very, very strong cohort where they actually play noticeably better than their rating would indicate. And this is now a trend across all ratings, starting from 1,000 going all the way up to 2,200, right? And because a lot of people started chess during COVID, and past COVID or post-COVID, they don't necessarily have this. And I don't want to sound like the guy who knows it all, but they don't have this wisdom to know that it used to be a lot easier. Not anymore. And so I do see a lot of people entering the chess realm, and the first thing they do is that they set numerically measurable goals. And I very strongly oppose this, right? So that's my number one don't. Don't set goals for yourself right off the bat. All right, so that's Andrus Toth. And then later in the interview, he continues, so there is so much going on chess-wise nowadays that, yeah, it's just a very, very difficult game with rating groups increasingly getting better. Like I was watching today a tournament somewhere in the United States. Unfortunately, I don't remember now where it's at. It might come to me. And someone was teasing GM Ben Feingold for drawing all his games, right? And I looked at his games, and his opponent's rating averaged between 2,000 and 2,100. So you would think that he should walk all over them. And I looked at the games, and all of them were fair and square draws. Like some he might have, been better off playing a bit longer. But today I saw a game he played against an 1800 guy. At no point was Ben with black better or reaching 0-0. So the opponent from move 1 till handshake had the upper hand on Feingold. And it's not because Ben played poorly. I have played the exact same line he played in that variation. And I'm like, this is it, guys. 1800s don't hang pieces and have a really good understanding of positional concepts by far and large. And you really have to go out of your way to beat them. So that would be my number one thing, that people will really come into the game with great expectations and the attitude of, oh, I'm going to achieve X, Y, and Z or whatever. And I really try to steer my students towards goals that are more process-based. It's a cliche, but it becomes so important early on in chess, like enjoy the process, enjoy learning. All right, so I know that was a little long. I was going to chop it, but I just thought it was a very interesting comment. And here is the response by the original poster. So the person who posted that quote by Andres Toth on Reddit, here was his response. He says, I've been playing chess for 25 years, technically 40 years if you count the small amount that I played at school, and I entirely agree with Toth's views. The standard of all levels of chess has increased massively. It is much, much harder to progress now, or if you've been playing for a long time, then maintaining your rating is tough, never mind climbing the rating ladder. This applies at all levels of chess, whether lower rated, intermediate, or advanced, right up to IM and GM. If you look at streamers playing over the board, or certainly the streamers of which I'm aware, they've all lost rating. Anna Kramling, Alexandra Botes, Levy Rosman, for example, have all tried to play OTB and are all significantly below their peak rating. Anna has 2 GM parents and still can't get anywhere near her peak rating. Alex has done a ton of work with GM Hammer because before that, she slumped to well below 2,000. Levy has made 0 progress towards being a GM and is nearly 100 points below his peak rating. That is simply because the standard of chess has increased massively. One factor that Toth did not mention is the enormous amount of resources available online. This means that the standard of play at all levels is so much more informed than in the past. And when you combine that with the sheer weight of numbers in terms of the player pool, it makes progression very difficult indeed. As someone who has coached players at different rating levels, I am often impressed by the standard of play at rating levels that would be considered mediocre or intermediate. I wanted newer players in particular to understand this because progressing as a chess player in terms of rating levels is harder now than it has ever been, and it's not likely to become any easier. So let me give my own take before I list some of the other comments in this post. It's just hard now. Chess, it's just very hard now. Just the players are stronger. It's true. I mean, I see it at the club all the time. We have these quote unquote lower rated players who are just doing so well. They're upending higher rated players all the time. We've had some crazy upsets, and that's just how it is now. And when I say that, I'm saying this just as a point of interest. This isn't whining, complaining, or poor me, or, oh, it's, it's a great game. But in a way, that's the beauty of it, because you always have to have your A game. You can never hope for or expect an easy game. That's sort of the TLDR here. I always tell people, just be very, very careful about looking at your opponent's rating and making a snap judgment. Because if you think you're going to have an easy time, you're sadly mistaken. Now, sure, those games are going to happen. You're going to have your lower-rated players who are going to hang a piece right away, but those are far and few between. It's just a much harder game now. I mean, just last night, because I'm running a club, I see this all the time. It's amazing how well some of these quote-unquote lower-rated players play. We had a game last night. It was an 1800 against a 1200, and it was king and pawns. Each player had king and pawns, but the 1800 player had a bishop and a knight. The 1200 player had no pieces, so we're standing around watching. It's the last game of the night. Now, selfishly, I'm hoping they're going to trade pawns, and it's going to be bishop and knight versus king, and does he know the bishop and knight maybe within 50 moves? I was really hoping for that because you really never see that. It turns out, though, that even though the 1800 had a bishop and a knight, The 1200, his king was very well placed. He was moving his king very well. And he had these two dangerous passed pawns. And for a second, I was like, wait a minute, don't even tell me he's going to win this. It looked like if he couldn't win it, that he might have had at least drawing chances. Like he could create a situation where the other player would have to give up his bishop or his knight. And remember, if he loses one of his minor pieces and all he's left with is a bishop or a knight, assuming he wins all his pawns, that's a draw, right? Because if you just have a king and a minor piece, you can't mate. So it would be a draw. And I thought he almost had it. And they were both in time pressure, moving quickly. And when the game's ending, they're like, yeah, what did we miss? And just watching it, I was like, you both played like well, like I wasn't saying anything. So I'm very curious. I told him when he puts it in the engine to see if he had maybe a drawing chance because it looked like it. But the point is, this quote unquote 1200 was playing amazingly well against a strong Class A player. And that's just how the game is now. And a lot of people don't like that because they are worried about their rating. It goes back to one of the emails from earlier where there's someone rated, say, 1100 and they're rated 1700. It's like, oh, I don't want to play this guy. He's not really 1100. And, the thing is, it just takes a long time for that rating to catch up, especially if they're not playing in a lot of tournaments. It is one of the flaws in the rating system. You just have a ton of underrated players now. And as we discussed earlier, players of all levels are feeling it. I mean, there's definitely deflation that still exists. I don't think that it's kind of mellowed out or evened out at all. But let's look at some responses by some other commenters on this post. So again, this is all about chess being much harder now. So here's one comment. It's because rating is not some objective measure of a certain set of skills. It's just a matchmaking tool for evaluating relative skill. If 1000chess.com represents the median, then as the general population gets stronger with the amazing free chess content out there, the median player will be stronger than the median player of 10 to 20 years ago. A player pool without Chessable courses, Danya, and Chessbrah, speedruns, detailed opening videos, free engine analysis, free opening explorers, free tactics trainers, etc., will be weaker than a player pool where those tools are widely used. If a 1,000 from each pool were to play each other, you would expect the one from the stronger pool to beat the other a lot more often in a match. Then in response to the quote, chess has become in general far more difficult to master than what it used to be, someone said no, it's become easier to master. It's become harder to beat your opponents because many of them are mastering it as well because it's become easier to master. There's tons of free resources available to master it now, resources where you don't even have to drive to a library and read a book for free, which was already pretty free to begin with. So an interesting sort of spin on that idea that, it's not easier to master, it's just harder to beat everyone else because they're mastering it as well. Interesting take there. Someone else said, ELO represents historic results rather than strength. Worse, it gives a rating in fixed steps rather than immediately jumping to a correct rating. And if players spend less time playing or change strength quickly, it takes a long time to fix. Yeah, that goes to what I was saying earlier about, that game with the 1,200 and 1,800 player at my club. It's a very good comment. And he continues, for example, I have heard it said that Carlsen jumped from 2,300 to 2,700 inside a year. It took 4 years for his rating to catch up. This is less of a problem online where the sites use Glicko and Glicko 2, which allow larger steps. I guess that's a software or some kind of calculation system. But he's right. In the over-the-board ecosystem, it does take a long, long time to catch up. So that was a very well-written comment. Also on the idea that chess is harder now, somebody said, this is remarkably true. I've played a few like 800 to 900 rated streamers on chess.com, and they're all way better than my 800 to 900 rated friends several years ago. They didn't make any stupid blunders, and every game was hard fought, even though before I quit chess.com just months ago, I was solidly 1,500 plus. It was really shocking to me, and I even lost a game playing irresponsibly because I expected them to fail to parry one of my threats, but he saw them all and outplayed me positionally. A 900 rated player. Everyone's built differently these days. Next comment is about the FIDE rating list. He says the number of active players under 2,100 to 2,200 has massively increased, while the number of players above that has actually decreased and is at an all-time low since like 2008 or something. This elite deflation sort of corroborates the observations in the post. The deflation affects title attainment goals as well. Only the very elite group, 2,700 plus, would be somewhat immune if they mostly play in closed circuits. Next comment, I don't think chess has gotten harder. It's just gotten harder to reach master level over the board due to a surge in underrated players entering the OTB rating pool after COVID restrictions were lifted. That has been my personal experience anyway. Yeah, absolutely. They're coming out of the woodwork. Someone else chimed in, I am a newer player myself, but this is something I've already thought about a lot. I've been playing for 2 years, and in that time, I racked up about 2,500 games, mostly rapid and some blitz, and reached 1,600 ELO on Lichess. I don't think it used to be very typical for a regular school club chess player to rack up 2,500 games in just 2 years. You'd go to your weekly chess meet, play a handful of games, and then go home. Maybe some play games here and there outside of the club, but you actually had to go out and meet people for that. You just didn't have that availability of online chess anytime and anywhere. And that's true. And that brings up an interesting point about online chess, because some people play a ton online and it improves their game. And some people play a ton online and it really doesn't help. But is it a question of the time control? Like if you play a ton of online games, but with slower time controls, is that going to be more valuable? But I've heard many people say that Blitz has helped them even with their slower over the board games. So it's really person dependent. But that's absolutely true. As a general statement, you're getting in so much more reps and so many more games because of online play than back in the day where you actually, like he said, had to leave the house and meet someone in person. And the final comment I'm going to read, been playing on and off since the 90s with a blitz rating generally in the 1300s, give or take. After taking several years off, I started back with a new account, and I'm really surprised by how good the players are now. Back in the day, a 1,000-ish rated player would leave pieces hanging all the time. This rarely happens now. And I'll just kind of play off of that comment. That's really true. I find that over the board as well. My opponent will be rated 1,000, 1,100, 1,200. And while I always know, I've been doing this long enough now, don't expect an easy game. Don't think just because that's their rating, they're going to play poorly. But, there's still this like little candle like inside you, like this little thing like, okay, they're going to make some kind of major blunder. And some of them just don't do it. You have a tactical threat and they see the threat. You even have a positional idea and they see that threat. You're expecting them to hang a pawn or hang a piece and they just don't do it. It's quite remarkable. Now, yes, let's not forget, there are still plenty of people who do play like their rating. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying though that's like extinct. There are 900 players that play like 900 players. There are players rated 1,000 that play like 1,000, et cetera, and so on and so forth. So there are going to be plenty of players who do make the typical kinds of mistakes that you would expect. They'll miss a mate in one. They'll miss a back rank mate. They'll miss an elementary like 2-move tactic. They'll simply hang a piece. They'll just move a piece where you can take it. That still exists. I'm not saying all 1,000 players don't hang pieces or all 800. No, of course they're still there. But it's just amazing how so many of them at that level like don't fit that expectation. They just don't play like their rating. And it's really quite remarkable, but that's how the game is now. It's certainly harder. Now, I will say that getting to 2,000 is definitely much, much harder now. Like if you're in that sort of 1,800 range and you're looking to get to 2,000, that's kind of where I'm at. That's just really hard now. Like getting from, let's say, 1,400 to 1,700, that's not too bad, or from 1,500 to 1,700, or from like 1,000 to 1,400, that'll play out. But once you start getting to like 16, 17, 1,800, and you're looking to get that 2 as the first number in your rating, man, it's tough, because the problem is when you beat the lower rated players, you're only going to get a few points on your rating. If you have a bad night or if they draw you, you're going to lose a lot of points if you lose to a lower rated. And then in order to really get a lot of points, you have to beat those players in your own rating category or higher. And it's just hard now. It's just really, really hard because it goes back to the comment by Andrus Toth. Like, players rated, say, 1,800, they're not going to hang pieces. This is generally speaking. Everyone has a bad night, but for the most part, they're not going to hang pieces. They're not going to make elementary tactical blunders. They're going to see your positional ideas. If you're losing, but there's a stalemate possibility, they're not going to stalemate you. Like, it's just, they're going to see the ideas. They're going to see the board very clearly. They're going to know when to transition from tactical play to positional play. It's just hard. Now, you're going to see the higher your rating gets, the harder it gets. Like, the better your openings have to be, your positional play has to be stronger. And when you play higher rated players too, those more subtle mistakes, they're going to take advantage of. They're going to just jump on it. So in other words, it might not be a blunder. It might be like a 1 question mark mistake and you're done. That's it. So for the most part now, assuming we're talking about true ratings where players are their strength, if you're rated, let's say 1,700 and you play a 1,400 player, as the 1,700, if you make a little bit of an inaccuracy or even a mistake, you're probably going to get away with it and you can probably still get away with the win. But if you're the 1,700 and you're playing like, let's say, a 1950 player and you make that mistake, they're going to jump on it. Like, even if it's just losing a pawn, and then they're just going to grind you down and win. And, then you get one of those positions where it's like you're trying to mix something up and do something and get out of this worst position. But it's like no matter what you do, you're going to lose. It's very hard now. It's still a great game. I love it, but it has certainly changed. And, anyone who says that rating deflation is not an issue, I don't know what they're sprinkling on their breakfast cereal, because it is. You just have a lot of underrated players. But I have to say, as someone who runs a club and as a tournament director, it's kind of cool to see. I also do like watching, I know this is, I guess, guilty pleasure. I do like watching upsets. Like, I like when the underdog wins. There's just something about, there's something about someone who always wins most of their games. When they get beat, like when somebody cools them off, I think it's, I think that's a good thing once in a while, kind of keeps them even keel, right? So I think for these higher rated guys, I think if they get knocked down a peg once in a while, I think that's okay. Everybody likes an underdog, right? So anyhow, that will do it for this week. This was a little bit more philosophical and more about the tournament scene rather than chess improvement, but that's okay, right? Every second of every podcast can't be like full chess improvement, or it's going to get kind of flat. So I like to mix it up a little bit. At any rate, really appreciate you listening. And as always, I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.